judgment. Is your heart lighter than the feather? That's one form of judgment, for sure. But the judgment we're talking about today is day-to-day life. Something happens, someone cuts you off in traffic, you're blind reacting judgment to people walking past you on the street, like, oh, that's pretty, that's ugly, they're this, they're that, I'm this, I'm that. Though how often do we truly see others as they are, free from the distortions of judgment, projections, emotional bias, cognitive bias, confirmation bias, comparison this, competing that, better this, worse than that. Does it actually make us feel better though? Even in the moment when it feels like we're making ourselves feel better somehow by comparing ourselves to others or judging others to feel that we're not so bad, or that they're so bad, so by consequence we're good, or whatever it might be. What judgment really does is reveal a void of comparison that shies away from facing the things in the way of us being our true self, in the way of us shining our light as we are, knowing that we are enough. Not to say that it's some sort of like bypass, oh, I'm perfect as I am, and therefore there's no need for me to self-reflect or make changes in my life. No, that's not what we're talking about. Judgment can even come in the way as a defense mechanism to facing the reality as it is. That we got shit to face. There's stuff we don't want to look at. There's truths we don't want to accept about ourselves and taking self-responsibility, and about the world as it is, let's say. Judgment, as I am almost certain you have felt. That's why you've clicked on this video. It's a bottomless bucket, an empty endeavor, because what we actually end up doing is trying to compare an apple to a carrot or a toe to a nipple. It feels pretty pointless, right? Like, they're completely different. Sure, you could say, oh, well, Sophie, the apple and the carrot, they're in the field of food, and so you can compare them. Or the toe and the nipple, they're in the field of the body, so you can compare them. So therefore, I can compare the size of my front teeth compared to someone else. Yeah, look, I'm not saying that you have to cut off the limb of judgment. The higher octave of judgment is discernment. And that's a survival mechanism for sure, but that's also the difference between living a good life and living an unconscious life. Yeah. So I'm definitely not saying we're going to cut off the limb of judgment entirely. I just want to bring awareness on what this thing actually is, this pernicious thing that we constantly do so blindly. Why? And what to do about it, so we can see others clearly. We can access a state of acceptance, awareness, which can lead to reason, which is the fusion of emotional intelligence with cognitive intelligence, right? But it doesn't stop at reason, because that's just in the mind. And then we learn to transcend into a more open space, which is love. Love is not an emotion, it's a state of being. So when I say love, I'm not talking about, oh, I just feel love sometimes. It's like, this is a state you can rest in. And I'm coming to this not as a master, but as someone walking the path with you. So this video has got a lot of juicy things to cover. Feel free to check out the timestamps to see the sections that we're going to go through. But I'm going to continue with a little bit of like a jam, slam poetry without the poetry, but I could try to rhyme. That would take some time. But you never know, because sometimes you just need to go with the flow, and you never know what's going to come out of your mouth in the now moment, because everything that you need is in the now moment. Everything that you need is the requirement for your breathing to take you into now. How? moving from the why into what. What's happening? Someone comes to you in the street. Okay, hair, love it. Face, don't love it. Ooh, ugly. Ooh, beautiful. Oh my God, I feel, You can get caught up in, okay, why am I doing this? And that's important. Though in the heat of the moment, the greatest thing you can do to see people clearly is drop into sensation. What is happening right now? What? I feel heat in my chest. I feel quivers in my heart. I feel tingles in my fingers. I feel rage. Ooh, I feel rage. There is rage. No need to attach a story to it, but acknowledging reality as it is, yeah? So just touching on that now, because we're going to go a little bit more into that as we go through. But really, we don't see others clearly because we're often seeing them through the filters of our unresolved wounds. If we have an unresolved wound surrounding self-worth, and let's say someone comes towards us on the street and we project that they embody higher self-esteem than us, right? We're projecting that reality to further perpetuate the story that we're not enough. You're not seeing them clearly. You're not seeing that they're also a fallible human being, right? We end up not seeing others clearly because of unmet childhood needs. Yeah. Love, acceptance, support, being held and accepted in our light and our shadow. Okay, so if we see somebody who's not afraid to cry in public or get angry at someone in public, then we can judge them because really what we're judging is that part of us within ourselves that feels too scared to do that. Or this is something that we saw, so we do that unconsciously too. Like, these are all the whys. It's infinite, yeah? We judge others because of our fantasies, our desires, our fears, our limiting beliefs, whatever it might be, conditioning, cultural, societal conditioning, all the things. We create stories in our head and unconsciously enlist those around us to fill those roles so they can play the part that we've consciously or unconsciously assigned to them based on the movie that we have running in our brain since years, right? And this is what leads us to walk blind through reality, blindly reacting instead of consciously responding. You feel the difference of that? Blind reaction is like, here's the catalyst, here's the reaction. No space in between. Conscious responding is like, here's the catalyst, space. Okay, I can see what's happening. Here's how I respond. And all this sounds great. Super cool. But you won't be able to actualize it until you practice it on the experiential level. Otherwise, you just stay in mind games. And it's nice. We need to understand things, for sure. But to actually make that shift in our life, it needs to be practiced in at the experiential level. And that's why we've got to know what's happening before we can choose a different story. Whoa, blind reaction, here we are. I'm noticing that I'm fully judging this person. Okay, not suppressing, noticing what's happening. Oh, heat in this body, heat in this part, heaviness, contraction, light breath. These thoughts. Okay, space. It's there. I don't need to do that. This video is not going to necessarily be about entirely this technique, but worth noting. I've mentioned this quote, I think, several times on this channel already, but it bears repeating. Repetition is the mother of all learning after all. This quote is by Carl Jung, the legend himself, and he said, quote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." End quote. The unconscious is the blind reaction. Bringing it into conscious light is the capacity to respond consciously, compassionately, right? the symphony in the background. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for supporting this work. Most conflicts arise not from malice necessarily, sometimes, sure, or incompatibility, but from misperceptions, assumptions, projections, unexamined emotional reactions. Seeing clearly is the gateway to healing, to transformation, both within and without, within the realm of relationship. Because those relationships are not just with other people. That is a relationship to life itself, a relationship to you. How's your relationship with yourself, with your own thoughts? Are you a slave to your thoughts? Are you a slave to your emotions? Do you believe everything that goes on in there? You know? And compassion. That's part of the learning process. I'm no master of it, but I'm definitely becoming more conscious of it. And by extension, a relationship to things that are seemingly inanimate, but in the spirit of animacy, which is the ethic of personhood, we recognize the personhood of all things. Not that we're going to have a conversation with a stone like we have a conversation with another human, but we recognize that there is an animate force, bringing some kind of consciousness to that. And there is a relationship that can be formed, a relationship with the mountain, a relationship with the home, your garden, the bees, the eucalyptus, whatever it might be. Everything is relationship. And that's why it's important that we can come to those relationships without blindly reacting as much. Like, sure, you can't, I don't think at this point, fully switch it off. Ultimately, if you reach higher stages of development and higher states of consciousness, sure. But for us, we just want to get to a point where we can even maybe notice the blind reactions, but instead of perpetuating the story, we can just take a moment and be like, yo, I can see what's happening here. I can see where this goes. I don't want to do that. Consciously choosing a different story. So the Hawkins scale of consciousness, yeah. This is going to appear on the screen now. And what you can see here is that where we are talking to when speaking of a state of acceptance is above willingness. And from acceptance, we reach reason, and from reason, we reach love. There needs to be some kind of willingness to be able to see things clearly. On the Hawkins scale of consciousness, courage, as you can see there at 200, is a massive node. This is where the previous sort of range ends and the new one begins. So yeah, hence discouraged to willing, right? From discouraged into willingness, and now we're moving from the non-acceptance to love. So yeah, just giving you the visual download of that, because I know for myself, I like to see things to get the visual imprint, so I kind of get a sense of structurally what's going on. Awareness, acceptance, reason, love. These are the foundations of clarity to move from blind reaction to consciously relating. Unlike emotional reactivity or superficial acceptance, reason invites us to look at situations more objectively, balancing, let's say, our emotions with thoughtful discernment. And this word is interesting, objective. Like, how can us as subjective points of consciousness possibly see something objectively? And it's a practice. That's why it's a path. It's not a fixed, static thing. So it is a practice to see things more objectively, to see more of the complete truth rather than just one side of the elephant. We want to see the whole elephant to understand what an elephant is, right? So reason can help us do that. It can help us get out of the looping stories. It can help us to even be more inquisitive about the situation. So we're going to get more into that as we go through. So let's just get into it even more. Sort of a long-winded introduction, but so many things to set the stage for. Okay, people. My people. Also, thank you for being here. It's really wonderful to be able to share this with you all. Okay, so this first part that I want to get into is understanding judgment and its barriers to clarity. So the origins of judgment. Huge! Why we misperceive others. Another quote, real quick, by Carl. Feels weird to call Carl Jung Carl, but that is his name. Carl Jung. He's just Carl Jung in my brain. I digress. Quote, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge." End quote. Judging is easy. It doesn't require as much thinking or reasoning. It's often an automatic snap reaction, like I've been speaking to, right? Our brains are wired to make automatic judgments about others' behaviors so we can move through the world without spending or investing too much time or energy in understanding everything that we come into contact with. So that's what I'm speaking to, yeah? Like compassion, this is automatic. This is how we are wired, but we can change the habit pattern of the mind in time. So why did we start judging others, and ourselves? As I said, we're wired that way, but why? Survival mechanism, for sure. This allows us to make very quick assessments of potential threats, of dangers, of like food sources, water. This is a survival mechanism. Applying this more to the day-to-day age where it's less about a survival mechanism, but still kind of is. You're going to go to judge if it's safe to cross the street, hence why it becomes discernment ultimately. But it's still there and it's still a necessary limb, hence why we're not cutting it off, right? Judgment in the level that we're also speaking to of interpersonally. It's due to a convergence of cultural and societal conditioning. Let's say the rat race of needing to be successful. More for them is less for me, right? The competitor mindset, scarcity mindset. This is the conditioning that we've received. So in that sense, we judge ourselves to others because we're constantly in that mindset of better than, worse than, better than, worse than, rather than the apple is an apple and the carrot is a carrot. Okay. There are also childhood experiences. We weren't given unconditional love. We had challenging and unhealthy school experiences, right? Maybe there was a really cruel teacher at a really young age, or maybe in our family of origin, it was tough, compassion to all of that. A lot of these things are outside of our control, okay? And it sort of makes me think of one of the stories that goes like, along the path there are many pebbles and thorns. And so are you going to try and just pick off all the thorns and the pebbles on the path? No, maybe you're not. But you can put on shoes and just walk along the path. So you can control what you can control. And other things, you don't try to. You just move forward as best as you can based on what has already happened and where you'd like to go. Another quote by Carl Jung goes like this, quote, "Although our conscious minds are avoiding our own flaws, they still want to deal with them on a deeper level. So we magnify those flaws in others." End quote. That's also why we judge. We don't want to look at our stuff because we've been programmed to see and place importance on outside. What's happening outside of us rather than what's going on inside. And this is also not your fault, okay? This is the programming. And every time I say programming, I feel like it has this real negative connotation. But let's try not to overlay it with that. There is programming, okay? So we see outside more than we see inside a lot of the time. The problem is outside. The things that are making us feel bad are outside rather than it's on us as well. Judgment becomes then a defense mechanism, right? We can judge others to protect ourselves. Labeling someone as selfish or cold may shield us from confronting our own fears of inadequacy or fears of facing the truth of who we are, which is sometimes selfish and cold, right? We end up judging people because of cognitive biases, confirmation bias, for example, right? Selective perception, like we see what we want to see. If we believe our boss, let's say, is careless, we're going to be consciously or unconsciously looking for ways that they are careless to further prove the story, right? And we can even then turn a blind eye to things which don't support the story. That's confirmation bias and cognitive bias. We judge because of unconscious projections, shadow projections, the unconscious mind, right? That is not actually unconscious. It's always conscious. 24/7, the unconscious is conscious. But where we rest, it doesn't seem conscious to us. Yeah. So unhealed wounds, let's say, that reside in the unconscious, a lot of the time, color our perceptions. A child's independence might feel like, for a parent, if their child is independent, abandonment wounds might flare up for the parent if they were left behind at some point, let's say. Okay? And so objectively, what's happening is the child's discovering who they are. They're going out more with their friends. They're not in the parent's view all the time. That's more objective. Subjective is, oh my God, my child doesn't love me. They're abandoning me. They're going here and there and they're not telling me what's happening. Did I do something wrong? Etc. You see? Both are existing simultaneously. And so judgment is also that you're judging a situation based on your own conditioning. And this moves us on into defining judgment a little bit more clearly. And particularly judgment in relationships, relationship to people, places, self. Judgment in a relationship refers to forming an opinion about someone, so their actions, their behavior, forming an evaluation about them, even about their choices, let's say, often based on our own personal perspective and standards, which can either be positive, right, more admiring, or negative, more like criticism. But when expressed excessively or harshly, can actually erode trust and intimacy within a relationship. Yeah? There's all these sayings of like, judgment is the silent killer of love. And there's a truth to that, sure. That's the whole point, like anything in excess, like constantly judging, then absolutely, it can destroy trust, it can destroy the other feeling really safe to be who they are. And certainly it can destroy intimacy in that respect because there's a then fear of judgment of opening up because it doesn't meet this criteria. Let's say I don't receive love in the totality of who I am. I only receive love when I'm in a good mood. These kind of things. But again, like there is a necessary bit of judgment, let's say discernment, so that you don't get walked over. So you don't just become complacent and accept everything that is actually a disservice to love because you're disrespecting love, you're disrespecting yourself, you're disrespecting truth, right? It's not like if someone is just constantly lying to your face every day that you're just going to like, in the name of no judgment, I'm just going to accept them as they are. Okay, cool. Like, kudos to you. For sure, we can zoom out and see that there's a reason which has led to this person acting this way. Great. But so you don't bypass, you've also still got to address how that's making you feel. Is that having a negative effect on your life? Do you feel like you're losing mental stability? Do you feel like you're kind of going crazy and that your self-esteem is being destroyed and actually they're not getting any better, no matter what you say? Okay, well then it's probably time to accept the situation as it is, and from that acceptance you can reason that this ain't it for your highest good, and compassionately with love, move forward or seek assistance, right? So that's what I mean, like, judgment isn't entirely bad. It's just anything in excess, and it's the volition, the intention behind the judgment, yeah? for our sake, let's continue speaking about the other side of judgment, which is more toxic, let's say. This kind of judgment creates a divide, turning relationships into battlegrounds of unmet expectations and unspoken resentments. Do you know what that feels like? Have you been in relational dynamics where it's like that? Where this just feels like there's some thick, unspoken thing in the atmosphere. And I'm not even just talking about partners, like I'm talking about friends, I'm talking about family, I'm talking about colleagues, teachers, whatever it might be. There is an emotional toll and a psychological toll living in relationships defined by misperception, where both sides feel unseen and undervalued. For example, let's say there's a guy who's really struggling with perfectionism, because this is what he grew up with. A very perfectionistic mum. Things needed to be exactly like this, otherwise there's punishment. And this person ends up growing up feeling really criticized constantly and inadequate. And he feels judged, right? He feels judged as so. He feels judged as inadequate because he didn't reach this standard, so to speak. But in reality, this mother's perfectionism stems from her own insecurity and fear of failure, which he interprets as controlling behavior. And so you can go back further. Okay, why is she like that? Likely that is the conditioning she received from her family, and so the story goes on. That's why the awareness allows us to snap out of the single mind, like the narrow focus, and into the bigger picture, so it can discharge a few things and help get us outside of that loop, zigzag, bad, so on. The thing is, the trap with just resting in judgment without seeing the bigger picture is that we get trapped in the good versus bad, the light versus dark, right? The black and white thinking, the victimhood, okay, feeling stuck in the drama triangle, things like that. And to get us to a space of awareness, absolutely, we need the willingness, right? Willingness, for me, feels like it goes hand in hand with curiosity. So curiosity then becomes one of the greatest antidotes to judgment. Why? Well, let's say you notice a judgment and the judgment feels rigid, it feels tight, it feels constricting. And you are able in that moment to find just a moment of, okay, wait, before I go into a huge story of why this is happening, let me step back internally, try to look at this from more of the observer, and open myself to curiosity. And then curiosity can feel more open, it can feel like it's moving, it can feel expanded, it can even feel a little playful. You can become curious about your own reactions to the situation. Like you become so convinced that your perspective is the right one. And heck, maybe it might be, right? But you can still access the curiosity to question that, so you don't slip into the black and white thinking. Notice what you are responding, how you are responding. What sensations are pulsing through your body? Do you feel heat? Do you feel thoughts which are saying a particular thing, which is creating more heat? And again, that helps us shift out of this constant story of why is this happening? Why? And simply what is happening. Sometimes for me, the why is this happening? Why can spiral me deeper into a process rather than out. And sometimes the what, like literally just baseline, what is actually physically happening right now, can help me discharge a little bit, access more of a state of balance within, to be able to then respond a little differently and less reactively. because there's no story with that. It's reality as it is. You're literally just feeling what's happening in your system, trying to not attach more of a story to it, right? And that's a practice, as I said. Whew, it's so much experiential wisdom that we need in these sort of terrains. Understanding something is baseline. For sure you need to understand, but then you also need to practice it. And so be gentle with yourself, be kind. This thing, it takes time, okay? But essentially, yeah, just to echo that back again, does that feel true for you? If you can tune in right now to something you might even be currently judging yourself on, or there's something that happened today or yesterday that you judged, about yourself or another. And can you feel in your system that there's a space that kind of opens up when you take a little step back or to the side or up and access more of a state of, what's going on here? What's happening here? Oh, I noticed that I'm having these thoughts, or yeah, I noticed that I actually feel really contracted over this. Let's see how long this lasts, or what else am I feeling? Right? The fact is, the mind zigzags. We have two hemispheres. You ever felt that? Yes, I've decided this thing. Okay, but I decided this thing and now I'm seeing all the reasons why I should have chosen this. Okay, I choose this. Ooh, but now I'm seeing all the reasons why I should have chose that. Woo! For example, the back and the forth. That's what the mind does. Bless the mind, the beautiful mind. It's got its own thing going on. So another antidote to the judgment, like what I've said before, but I'm going to say it more explicitly, is connecting to the sensations of the body in the moment. Your body is a portal to the present moment. Your body is always present. It exists in the present moment. Your mind can drift to the future. Your mind can drift to the past. But your body is here. And because the mind drifts to the future, there is a sensation, a memory that comes, let's say, or a future projection that comes, which you start to attach an emotion to, and then your body feels that. Sure. But your body in and of itself, it's here. It's present. It shows you what's going on. So the other antidote to judgment is connecting to the sensations of your body as it is right now. Something which has come through so strong the last days for me is that the answers reside in the present moment. And I felt the truth of this before, but it's just deepened, really deepened for me what this actually means, particularly by practicing that cultivation of connecting to the sensation as it is, without wanting it to be something different, without craving for something else, without pushing it away. Like, oh wow, this is how I'm actually feeling. So this, when I'm making a decision, I can be like, oh, okay, these are all the stories that I'm seeing in my mind about the future projections and how it might be and whatever. Or drawing from the past, this is kind of what happened when I had a similar decision, but none of that exists. What exists is now. How do I feel right now? Okay, that's how I feel right now. There's my decision. Whoa. There's a simplicity to that. There is a simplicity to the antidote of judgment. What's happening now? There's many places that you can go when you actually access the reality as it is. Because you're in truth. And from that point, clarity can arise. You can access reason. You can access love. So what's happening right now? Practice it with me just for a moment. You're sitting here. Maybe you're driving. Maybe you're lying down. Maybe you're watching this on a phone. Maybe you're watching this on an iPad, a laptop. Or maybe your screen's off and you're just listening. So just notice. You can notice the sensation of sound of my voice. You can notice the sensation on your skin. Maybe there's sun on your skin. Maybe there's a light breeze. Maybe you feel cold. Maybe you feel hot. You can notice there's a sensation on your skin, the touch of the clothes upon your skin, of your hair. Maybe you can notice a sensation of taste in your mouth. Maybe you're sipping a tea. You can taste that. You can notice smell. Do you have an incense burner going? Is someone cooking in the other room? Or maybe you're in an environment which doesn't smell too good. Just notice it. Notice that it doesn't smell good and don't attach a story to it. It just is. So you've noticed sound, you've noticed touch, you've noticed taste, you've noticed smell. I invite you to also notice thoughts. How is your mind? What are you telling yourself? And maybe it's hard to access that because I'm speaking to you. But there is a baseline sensation that you can probably attune to of the state of your thoughts right now. Just how you're feeling. Yeah. And there's also a sensation that you can attune to, which is more of an emotional one. And that emotional one might feel like something in your body too. Maybe it's a sort of openness in your chest. Maybe there's a baseline of anger there, or impatience. Or maybe you feel a little bit sad because I'm inviting you to think about judgment, and maybe that's a big thing for you. That's okay. My invitation right now is for you simply and completely just to notice. No other task is needed. You don't need to know why, you don't need to know how, you don't need to project that it should be different. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. Oh, I wish I was feeling that. But you're just noticing. That's all you're doing. So simple. So simple in theory, but often hard in practice. Because we're so used to being here and there and projecting that it should be this and we need to do that and that's not good. It's a symptom of the society. You're all good. Hence why this needs to be a conscious practice though. But you see how simple that is? You see that if there is a judgment that starts to come and you notice that it's come quick, that instead of being like, oh my God, I just judged someone, and then the angel and the devil are like fighting and you're just like, whoa. You can take a step back. You can see the angel and the devil fighting and you can be like, look at them go. And here I am observing this. Or you can notice that there's anger that comes through your system and be like, oh, look at that. There is anger. Cool. Right? You see how you're not getting into a story? And you see how it sounds really easy, but actually in the moment when you are really angry, that would probably be harder. Exactly. Hence why it's a practice. Hence why you practice when you're not in the heat of the moment. Yeah. If any of you have sat a Vipassana, this is very much what I'm talking about. If you haven't sat a Vipassana and you are interested, I recommend it. If you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, you can research it. It's a wonderful thing. Vipassana. Vipassana. This will help you to practice exactly that. But you also got to want to do it. Don't just do it because I told you so. You actually have to want to. So moving on. Reason as the gateway to clarity. What is reason? Okay. Reason for me kind of elicits images of the thinker, like the sculptures and Greek times, columns and grapes and books, you know. But that isn't entirely what it is. Reason, according to the Hawkins scale of consciousness, is the capacity to you use your abilities and your talents to make meaningful contributions to the world. At this level, you've transcended the emotional aspects of the lower levels in the Hawkins scale of consciousness, and you begin to think clearly and rationally. Hawkins defines this level of reason as the level of medicine and science, which is interesting, specific. When you reach this level, you become capable of using your reasoning abilities to their fullest extent. You have the discipline and the proactivity to fully exploit your natural abilities. You've reached the point where you can say, wow, I can do all this stuff and I know I must put it to good use. So what's the best use of my talents? You can take a look around the world and start to make meaningful contributions is essentially the thing. And so these words were deriving from Steve Polina, by the way, in his, just pulling from some of the things that he describes about it. So, but just want to zoom in a little bit of the making meaningful contributions in relation to what we're speaking about here in this video. A meaningful contribution to the heat of the moment is the capacity to access reason and be like, whoa, okay, I have awareness. I can see that there is more happening here than I have conscious awareness of. I can see that I've practiced enough that I can see these in my default reactions, and I apply logical discernment and emotional intelligence to then respond differently. That is a very meaningful contribution to the moment, because then you step out of the loop of misery and spiraling into a self-judgment, whatever it becomes. And you also don't enable the other. Let's say if it's a fight, you don't enable the other to spiral, because you take a step back. And from that step back, you can identify what the real aligned action next step is. We'll get more into practical tips a little bit later. But while I'm speaking about reason, as I imagine, if you have someone who has watched several videos on this channel, you'll know that I don't like black and white. I love black and white visually. Oh my goodness, love it. But in terms of energetically, emotionally, mentally, black and white isn't useful a lot of the time. So reason isn't entirely wonderful. On the flip side, if you are overly attached to reason, you can be way too identified with the mind, which is why it doesn't stop with reason. This is why we need to open to love. So to move from a purely intellectualized understanding of compassion, for example, that's why we need that first-hand experiential, we need the first-hand direct experience. That's what gets us out of intellectually understanding something and actually practicing it, actually embodying it. Yeah. So that shifts us from knowing a thing or having knowledge of a thing to knowing a thing. Okay. So just know that there is a shadow side to reason of it being way too intellectualized, being way too in the mind, and not actually practicing the thing. But it's still necessary. It's still necessary to be able to see it from a different lens and then act. So ultimately, this is teaching us how to be equanimous, yeah, but in time. Okay, don't get fixated on this word. It's a practice. It's just the capacity, really what we're speaking about, to step back from emotional reactivity that is blind and approach situations with more clarity, with more of a capacity to see it from a different perspective. So reason in that sense isn't cold detachment, but a thoughtful process that integrates emotional awareness and cognitive discernment. Reason then can represent the beginning of true clarity without blind judgment, which is a critical step before entering the more non-linear, transcendental experience of love as a state of being, not an emotion you then try to cling to. Yeah. While love operates beyond logic, reason provides the structure and the foundation that can make this sort of more transcendent, compassionate state possible. So reason as inquiry, okay? Reason can invite us to question rather than assume. That in and of itself is massive. I can assume so quickly, like boom, there, I've made an assumption and now I'm acting upon that assumption and it spirals. It doesn't go to plan because I was acting upon an assumed reality. I didn't ask questions. I didn't clarify. Have you experienced that? Have you just like blindly assumed and you're like, oh God, I did it again? All good. So reason helps us to question rather than assume. Instead of labeling someone's behavior as selfish, you can ask, what might be driving their actions? What context am I missing? Am I assuming I know the full picture? You can ask them. You can share, hey, yo, I feel that landed in my system in an unpleasant way. Just want to make sure I fully grasp what's going on here. Let's clarify. Have you heard of nonviolent communication? This is by Marshall B. Rosenberg. Really, really great book. I highly recommend you read it. Nonviolent communication is essentially the capacity to communicate in a way that can lead to more empathy, right? Not assuming, like questioning, not blaming, expressing. So here's a nice quote here, which I'm going to read out for you guys. It goes like this, quote, "All violence is the result of people tricking themselves into believing that their pain derives from other people and that consequently those people deserve to be punished." End quote. Yeah, that's a hard thing to do a lot of the time, to take full self-responsibility. We've been programmed to see that's the problem, there's the blame, that's where I'm placing my focus. It's a massive feat to be like, okay, this thing outside is happening. I don't have control over this, but I have control of how I'm responding. Huge. But reason can help us do that. Reason can help us eventually reach empathy, which is also the premise of nonviolent communication, because it asks us to consider the other person's perspective without necessarily just ditching our own. We're able to hold our own perspective, but we're also able to expand our awareness to include their own. What are they seeing that I'm not? Right? I kind of briefly mentioned this example before, but there's a story of how there are 5 blind men, and they are all brought to an elephant to describe what an elephant is. And one of the blind men there, he's holding the leg, and he's like, oh, the elephant, it's like a big column going up. And then another man is like touching its ear. It's like, oh, it's so soft. The elephant is very soft, with a little bit of hair, soft, hairy thing. And the other say all something different. Someone's at the tail. Oh, it's like a broom, right? And they're not wrong, but their truth is partial. The fuller truth, the truth of the elephant, is more complete with each of their perspectives rather than just one. So this is essentially the practice of empathy, the capacity to be able to see that you are touching the leg of the elephant and it's happening, it's real, it's valid, and that the person touching the elephant's ears perspective is also real and true and valid for them. Cool, right? This helps us cultivate humility because we don't know it all. Even though sometimes we feel very convinced that we do. And I say this not to undermine our perspective, yeah? Not undermining your perspective. But just able to see that we might not have the full picture. And that can create a space for dialogue. It can create a space for connection instead of assumption, right? You can ask, or say from you saying this, I feel this, is that what you meant? Instead of just assuming, oh my God, they're trying to hurt me, this is the worst, they're such a bad person, and spiraling. You can stop all that. It's a waste of your energy. You can ask them, hey, I interpreted what you said as this. Is that what you meant? Whoa. Amazing. How simple, but it's hard. So I fully get it. Yeah. Not always easy. Hence the practice. I'll keep saying that. It's a practice. Don't expect to be perfect. It's not a fixed thing. It's constantly dynamic because you're always changing. They're always changing. Whoever's always changing. So we keep returning to it. So to see more objectively, we can pause before reacting. Notice triggers and just take a moment to breathe. Reflect before responding. If that's really hard for you, I know for me, sometimes if it's more heated, that's super tough. And what I actually need to do is just leave the space for 5 minutes and then come back when I'm discharged. That's huge in and of itself, but that saves a lot of unnecessary emotional energy based on a snap judgment. Yeah. You can ask clarifying questions, as I said before, to encourage curiosity over assumption. Instead of reacting to somebody's silence and judging it as bad and saying, why are you ignoring me? You can ask, hey, you seem pretty quiet. Is there something on your mind? You're allowing yourself to see them more clearly. You see, if anything, the core of what we're saying is that shift from assumption to curiosity, reaction to curiosity, compassion. Check your foundation. You can test if your reactions are based in anything of substance or if they're just super loaded with emotional content and projections. Is there evidence that contradicts your judgments? Right. If you believe your best friend never listens, they never listen to me, you can actively notice instances where they don't listen and speak about it then and there. So you're not dredging up old stuff from the past and it seems all vague and messy. But you're just saying it in the moment, like, oh, I'm noticing this thing. This has been a trigger for me. Can we speak about it? Right? So it doesn't fester. It's a good foundation. You can access that space of acceptance of the reality as it is, access reason to speak about the thing, and open yourself up to love, understanding, compassion. And you can practice nonviolent communication, which is the method of communication that aims to improve understanding and connection through empathy. And this is a massive way to move away from the blind reactivity to compassionate presence. Okay. So just a quick example here again. Let's say you're in a relationship and your partner forgets the anniversary. And this could lead to feelings of neglect. Oh my God, they don't care about me. I'm not important enough in their life for them to remember, right? But reason allows you to take a step back from the narrative of they don't care about me, whatever it might be, and consider alternative explanations. Okay, I know that they're in a really stressful period at work. Their mum's not very healthy right now. I imagine that's really stressful for them. Or they've got something huge on, like whatever it might be, yeah? And so the shift in perspective can prevent escalation and foster understanding without undermining the validity of your response to it. Like, okay, I'm noticing that I feel hurt because maybe the anniversary is more important for me than it is for them. And maybe that's what I'm realizing. So I'm noticing I feel hurt. That's valid. I'm not going to try and push that down. And I'm expanding my perspective to include theirs where they're at, that context. Okay? So that's what reason can help us to do. Here's the circle of us and our world, another concentric circle to expand our awareness to what's happening for them. Okay? So we are not ever necessarily fully disregarding our own experience because that's self-rejection, that's denial, that's suppression, that's repression, and that's not healthy. But to get us out of the narrow-minded judgment, assumption, That's the practice. Curiosity, 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 right? So then reason is a sacred practice of discernment. It doesn't negate emotion, but it brings the experience into alignment with truth, paving the way for a deeper, more real, more honest, vulnerable connection, and with more trust, regardless of the relationship, be it partner, be it friend, be it boss, whatever and whoever it might be with. Because as I said before, the higher octave expression of judgment is discernment. Yeah. Higher, not as better, just as closer to truth. So, the journey from acceptance to reason to love. Yeah. We've spoken about reason, but I also want to speak to acceptance, which is a huge part of this series. So throughout this series, I'm going to be speaking a lot about acceptance. Acceptance begins where judgment ends. It's the willingness to embrace the person as much as we can in their entirety, their strengths, their weaknesses, their beauty, their imperfections. Acceptance, when you can access that, is a catalyst of a powerful shift. You can awaken to the possibilities of living proactively. Okay? At the level of willingness, you're like, yeah, okay, I can put my capacity into good use, and that good use is the capacity to see the reality as it is without blindly reacting. And if something isn't flowing well in your life like you want it, your career, your health, your relationships, you can access and define what is the outcome you want, and you can move towards it. You can start to see the big picture of your life. And acceptance is the state in which we can do that. There is not a lot of change that can happen if we aren't actually accepting the reality as it is, from which to then shift. So much in my life, there's been this thing that I know I've wanted to shift, but I haven't first accepted it. I've tried to go towards the thing while still fully rejecting and unconsciously trying to push away the thing that I'm trying to change. And then what it does, what I resist persists. It keeps growing. It's like by not looking at it, it just gets bigger and bigger over there because it's trying to get my attention, because it wants to be resolved. The system wants to be healthy, right? And so actually that non-acceptance makes the problem worse. So acceptance is a practice. Okay, it's tough a lot of the time to accept things that are just really uncomfortable. Okay, so compassion to that as much as possible. Acceptance really looks like the capacity to accept complexity. Paradox. Things and people aren't one-dimensional. So to truly accept someone or something, we got to see that there are paradoxes within the situation. There are nuances and complexities that we might not fully understand, okay? We can accept, another face of acceptance is the capacity to face change. Face the fact that relationships, life, it's dynamic. Okay, notice that you are constantly changing too. So previously what was maybe fine is maybe no longer fine for you. And there might be a judgment that comes with that and a story that you overlay with that, and it spirals into something. Or you can find acceptance with that change is constantly happening. And here's a judgment. Okay, I can be aware of that without reacting more. And maybe there's a boundary that needs to shift, or a space of growth that wants to be spoken to. Acceptance allows us to see and embrace ourselves as well. When we accept ourselves, it correlates with our capacity to be able to accept the other. When we resist our own flaws, we project that resistance onto others. We resist others and their flaws. We project that they are resisting us, that they are judging us. But really, the judgment of the other is a reflection of how we're already judging ourselves. And acceptance is not necessarily like, oh, I've accepted that, therefore it's gone fully. It's simply the capacity to see it as it is. So you're not blind to it. You're not blind to the fact that you're judging yourself and therefore you're judging others. You're like, oh, that's what's going on right now. Actually, that's what's been going on for a while. Oh, this is a pattern for me. Look at that. There it is. I can see it. Know thyself. The work of a lifetime. Because you are not fixed and you're always changing. So there's constantly more things to learn. And from that space of acceptance, we can therefore even accept responsibility. Accept the fact that a lot of the time, it's just hit the microphone. A lot of the time, we're the cause for our misery. It's a hard pill to swallow, I know. We are responsible for what we can control. And what we can control is not necessarily what's happening outside. We are in control of how we respond. We are in control of where we place our focus. And where we place our focus is where energy goes. If we place our focus on all the things that are bad, more energy is going to all the things that are bad and they get bigger. The example I gave before of what you resist persists, in the name of resisting the thing and looking elsewhere, it might seem that you're putting your focus elsewhere, but that act of rejection and aversion is actually bringing energy towards the thing that you're trying to move away from. So that's why acceptance is absolutely key. So you're not unconsciously making the situation more painful for you. So know that acceptance also means responsibility, and knowing that there's a lot we can't control. It's super sunny out, it's super hot, and we're not going to ask the sun to dull down its light. We're maybe going to go outside with a hat on, and we're going to hang out in the shade under the tree rather than walking under the blazing sun on the beach. We control what we can control, yeah? So that's massive and key. So on a more practical level, to cultivate presence and move away from judgment in everyday relationships is to just really check your triggers. When you're triggered, when you notice you're then judging, it presents an opportunity to explore why, which can lead to greater self-awareness. And it's almost like it opens a door for you being able to see that what exists outside exists inside. This is content for shadow work a lot of the time. Your judgments are content for self-healing. And the healing of self is ultimately the healing of the other. If you think about it, if you're in an unhealed, this feels like, I'm not going to say that. That feels polarizing. Like you're either healed or unhealed. That's not the case. Let's say oh my God, I'm trying to think in colors. If you've got a blue swarming mass around you, and when you come into contact with other people, that blue swarming mass then starts to swarm around them. That's a visual for what happens when we're just blindly reacting, we're blindly judging, we're in this haze, we're not seeing reality clearly. And that leaks onto other people. And if other people come into our field and they've got a swarming black cloud and that starts to swarm around us, that's them leaking their stuff onto us, right? So of course, if we do the work and we take responsibility and we can find acceptance and reason to not assume, but to be curious, to access love, that's us withdrawing that blue haze. That's them withdrawing that black haze. And it's no longer our masks speaking to each other. It's two people in imperfect, but present. Come back to the body and notice what is happening at the physical experiential level. You've got sight, you've got sound, you've got taste, you've got smell. Sight, sound, taste, smell, thoughts, and there's another one. There's 6, I might think of it. But that's what I'm saying, there's sensation, right? And that exists in the present moment. So if you're feeling triggered, if you're feeling judgmental, practically just come back to what's happening now. And as I've shared earlier in the video, that sets up a nicer ripple for how to then move forward without just continually adding to the fire of judgment. Cultivate the mindful communication. Approach conversations with curiosity, openness, nonviolent communication. Go to authentic relating workshops. A bunch of resources you can do to cultivate mindful communication. But the key of it is honesty. Honesty, honesty, honesty. And gratitude, huge. For myself, if I'm in judgment about myself particularly, gratitude really helps to be able to see what are the things that are really wonderful, Sure, there's room for growth, there's things that I don't necessarily like, but instead of dwelling upon that, whoa, how cool that I'm able to see this from a higher vantage point, or how cool that these wonderful things are happening, and I have shifted out of this, and these beautiful people are in my field, cool, gratitude. Acceptance, love, reason, all these things together are the pathway forward from judgment. But remember, that bridge is mostly acceptance. And to get to acceptance, we need to be willing. And when we're willing, we can be curious. To move from the blind judgment into a state of curiosity, which can move us into acceptance, reason, and love. Yeah. So that leads us to the end of this video. And a final note. We've spoken a lot about judgment, and it has many connecting threads. Okay. The main juicy part of this video, in order to see others clearly without the filter all the time of blind judgment, is to be able to cultivate a space where instead of even judging the fact that we've judged, adding stories all the time, is to create just a little bit of space where we are able to see the judgment come through and then look at it. Just notice that it is there. You don't need to know necessarily why, because that can spiral you into a big story. But in the moment, notice it is there. Notice if there is a tendency to then judge the fact that you've judged and now you're judging and judging and judging. Try to take a step back. And you do that by noticing what is happening right now in the body as the portal to the present moment. And breathe, and breathe, and breathe. When you access that space, you've created a bit of time between a judgment and a further blind reaction. And from that, in that space, you can create a better, more whole foundation from which to move forward, from which to communicate with more empathy, from which you realize you need a time out, from which you realize you're in blame and actually you want to ask some more questions, yeah? The premise of this video is really speaking about that gap between blind judgment to reaction. That's the space. That's what we want to work on. This is how you see others clearly. I'm not telling you that you need to stop all judgment ever. I don't know if that's actually possible. It might be, okay? The monks in the caves, I bet that they've got there. Bless them, they worked hard for that. For our purposes, we want to focus on that, making that gap a little bigger by practicing, noticing what is happening right now without attaching a story that it is good or it is bad, and then move forward from a more conscious place. Love then becomes not something we achieve, but something we are continually practicing and embodying. Acceptance becomes something we are continually practicing and embodying, all of it. And this is the key to healthy, solid relationships with life itself. Life and the relationship that is life becomes a reflection of the divine essence within us all. I truly hope this video was useful for you. If you have made it all the way through, I celebrate you. It's not often easy to carve out time to gift ourselves this education for self-reflection, for work, for self-actualization, for well-being, for all the things. So I celebrate you. Thank you for giving yourself this time. Thank you for supporting this channel and this work that I'm passionately sharing here. Stay tuned for the next videos to come as part of this magical new series we're in. Of course, I recommend that you watch them sequentially, but if this is the first video you've watched of the series, hey, what's up? All good, you don't need to watch them in order. And welcome to the channel if you're new to the channel. To support this space, you can hit the like button for me. It helps the algorithm somehow, and that's cool. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Hit the notification bell to be notified when I'm releasing more content. There are videos coming on this space every week. And share this with your people. If this is a message that's really resonated for you and you would like to share it with people in your life, do that. All good. There's no gatekeeping here. Spread it. Great. Amazing. If it's useful for you, then maybe useful for others. And know as well that if you are ever looking for one-to-one support on your own journey, look at the offerings I have below. I would be honored to assist you on your path to discover your true self and to be sovereign creatively and in aligned with your purpose. So lots of love to you, and I will see you in the